Bloomberg is reporting employees are suing Twitter, though, over these layoffs. A proposed class action lawsuit filed in California yesterday alleges that Twitter is removing employees without enough notice, violating California's WARN Act. So for more on this, I want to bring in Ben Bergman. He is a senior correspondent for Business Insider. Good to see you, Ben. So let us talk a little bit about this lawsuit. The lawsuit is specifically for former employees in California. But could there be a ripple effect for Twitter employees in other states? Because in some cases, you can't just fire somebody without cause, and you can't just make up a cause, which, sometimes employers try to do.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there could potentially be other legal action here as well, because this has all happened so quickly. And Twitter informed employees yesterday that they were going to tell everyone by 9 a.m. Pacific today whether they would be terminated. And they were going to do that over email, which is not the way most employees are terminated.
So, as you know, there are more than 7,500 Twitter employees that are bracing for their layoff notices. Some have already been notified as of this hour. Is this just about Elon Musk buying this company and trying to make it profitable and sort of shooting from the hip when it comes to sort of trimming the fat? Because one of the things that I think is perhaps not, and look, I know that he's successfully running other companies, so he does have a track record. So in other words, as a businessman, you might argue that he knows what he's doing, given the success of Tesla, for example. But I wonder, when it comes to this particular company, a social media company is very different than an automobile company. And I wonder if these layoffs will have an effect on the actual product. I mean, if all of a sudden we start to see bugs, we start to see people, we've already seen people spouting misogynistic and racist comments on Twitter, where in the days before this takeover would have led to a suspension or removal of those posts, that we could see what he says he doesn't want. What did he call it when he sent a letter?
He doesn't want a hellscape.
He doesn't want a hellscape. But by letting the people go who are responsible for preventing it from turning into a hellscape, isn't that somehow going to lead to that?
That's the $60 billion question. And it really seems hard to believe. When he says he doesn't want to be a hellscape, he's firing all the people in a very hellish manner who are in charge of protecting the product. And that's what you've seen today and yesterday, is all these people coming out on Twitter saying, we made less there than we would have made at other tech companies, but we did it because we believed in the mission, and we were the people in charge of content moderation, and we're gone. So, how is he going to do that? At the same time, he has to make Twitter, which has traditionally been very unprofitable, he needs to make it profitable. And the way you usually do that is by laying off people. And he has indicated he wants to lay off anywhere from 50 to 75% of the staff.
And there was some speculation as to whether or not he was going to try to lay people off before they could maximize on their stock options. But it appears as if everyone's going to get the new price on the stocks, so at least they'll have some money on the way out. But, he kind of came right in and wiped out the kind of executive level management. And you have to wonder whether or not there is a concern about how are you going to overhaul this company when kind of some of your key people who were managing are now gone, and we don't have an idea of who might be replacing them.
This is Elon's MO, though. He comes in very quickly. He brought the kitchen sink when he came in. He put that on Twitter. He brought in two of his kind of own, David Sachs and Jason Calacanis, kind of people he knows or people from his orbit, and fired pretty much the executive team. And he's not going to go to a consulting company. He's not going to wait around for something to happen. He wants to do this very quickly. But it's like, what's the plan? Yeah. How is he? Because it's not only his money, remember. Twitter now has to pay $1 billion in interest payments every year to their lenders, which is more than they have brought in profit. And they need to do that very quickly. So he's throwing the kitchen sink at the wall.
That's so great. Yeah, I love that mixed metaphor. Because earlier I said spaghetti at the wall, because I think I saw an interview with one of the investors who invested, I think, less than $1 billion. Mm-hmm. And he said he wasn't nervous at all, but he did expect, and I think he did expect that 90% of the ideas that we hear being floated around are going to sort of crash and burn. But that is what happens when you're trying to completely change a platform like this. But I had also read that one of the things that Elon Musk is known for is his reliance on engineers, that he's not so crazy about managers because he thinks engineers can engineer their way out of sort of problems. But part of the challenge that we've seen with managing social media is that AI does not work very well when it comes
sometimes people.
You need people looking at the stuff. Like they have not mastered that yet.
Right.
Well, he loves engineers, and he has said that he thinks even managers should come from an engineering background. And that's been one of the interesting things is Twitter engineers have put pictures of themselves working all night, all weekend, 24 hours, sleeping bags on the floor to try to impress Elon and prove that they are worthy of him and can stay, because he said he wants to unveil all these product features, ship them in the industry parlance very quickly, and that if they're not ready, he's going to fire them. So this is like a Hunger Games contest where the few remaining staffers who at least for now are still there are trying to prove that they are worthy of Elon.
Sounds like a lovely place to work.
Yeah,
Forget about the platform being a hellscape.
I know. I mean, look, it is sad to know that there will be some people that will be losing their jobs today. But I suspect also that many of these people, having worked at one of these companies, Silicon Valley company, will hopefully be able to find something else, and that they'll be appreciated for their efforts.
Hopefully.
is the goal. Ben Bergman. Thank you very much.
Silicon Valley is not exactly hiring right now. Thank you.
That's a good point.
That's a good point.
Because you know what we were talking about earlier is that, yeah, there's a lot of focus on Twitter and all the layoffs, but there are plenty of other tech companies that are laying off. Lyft just announced today that they're going to be laying off.
That's true.
Twitter hasn't made money at all, but a lot of these other companies haven't either. And maybe what we're looking at is a correction that is a long time coming. And we're running out of time, so we can't even talk about that.
Ben?
Topic for another day. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man. We appreciate it.